But we can't just ignore Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto when generating a birth chart, Arlo. That feels incomplete.
By the blazing constellations. Ella, we're studying traditional astrology. There's no place for outer planets or asteroids in this system.
Really? I've seen plenty of so-called traditional astrologers include the outer planets in their readings.
That's exactly the problem. By mixing in the outer planets, we dilute the classical framework. The traditional planets should hold center stage. Trust me on this.
I don't know, Arlo. The outer planets are usually my go-to when reading a chart. Without them, I feel like I'm missing half the picture.
Have faith, Ella. Once you grasp these core techniques, you won't need Uranus or Neptune or Pluto to make sense of a birth chart.
Those are pretty tall claims, Arlo. I hope I'm not wasting my time by going back to basics.
You won't regret it. By the time we're done, you'll be a completely different astrologer, more precise and powerful than ever. Hello and welcome to the 4th episode of our Learning Traditional Astrology series. I'm Arlo, and I've spent 10 years immersed in traditional astrology, especially the study of nativities. Joining me are Ella, my fellow explorer, Clara, our newest member, and Cherry, our ever-helpful robotic assistant. Ella, care to kick things off?
Thanks, Arlo. Hi everyone. I'm Ella. I've studied modern astrology for 3 years, so I already know how to cast a birth chart. Though I'm guessing you're about to show me a very different approach.
Exactly. Today we're discussing what a horoscope or birth chart really is and how it's put together in traditional astrology. Cherry, can you pull up the sky view for March 21st, 2022, just before sunrise in New York?
Processing, Arlo. Generating visuals now.
Wonderful. Now, if you look at the screen, this red arching line is the ecliptic. It's along this path we locate the sun and planets. Cherry, can you walk us through the primary motion?
Certainly. The primary motion is the daily rotation of the sky, right to left, completing a 360-degree sweep every 24 hours. That's why we see a new sunrise each day. Meanwhile, the planets also have a slower secondary motion, which moves them forward in the zodiac over time.
Thanks, Cherry. Ella, which planets do you notice on the ecliptic in this image?
Venus, Mars, and Saturn are off to the east. The moon is over in the west. It's pretty similar to what I'd expect from any modern chart. So what's new here, exactly?
By Jupiter's mighty thunder, give me a chance to show you. The sun's below the horizon, so day is dawning. The ascending degree of the ecliptic is our ascendant, associated with life force and vitality.
Right. The ascendant is just the zodiac sign rising on the eastern horizon. Makes sense.
And the green line is the meridian, correct? Where it meets the ecliptic is the Midheaven, or MC, an area of the chart associated with career and public reputation.
Spot on, Clara. The MC culminates above the Earth, often marking the 10th house cusp in quadrant systems. Now, all of this can be mapped onto a circular chart, showing planets above and below the horizon. Cherry, pull up the chart with whole sign houses, and no outer planets, of course.
Sure, Arlo. Casting the chart, March 21st, 2022, 6:23 a.m., New York, whole sign house system, outer planets excluded.
I still don't see why we can't consider the outer planets, but fine. So, this is our chart of the moment, right?
Exactly. You can see the ascendant labeled AS at about 14 degrees of Pisces. Directly opposite, in the 7th house, is the descendant, marking the western horizon.
Arlo, can you clarify how the whole sign house system works in practice? If Pisces starts the first house at 14 degrees, does the entire sign of Pisces count as the first house?
Exactly, Clara. In whole sign houses, the entire sign of Pisces is the first house. That means Aries is the second house, Taurus is the third, and so on, regardless of exact degree.
That seems too simplistic. In modern astrology, a house can straddle 2 different signs. Plus, the midheaven usually marks the 10th house. So how does that factor in here?
Good question, Ella. In the whole sign approach, the midheaven can actually land in the 9th or the 11th house, sometimes even other places, depending on the observer's latitude. It's a different perspective but foundational to traditional astrology.
All right. I see how it aligns signs and houses neatly. But aren't we also supposed to use those old square layouts to be truly traditional?
Many ancient astrologers did prefer square charts, but I find circular charts more versatile, especially when you want to compare whole sign with quadrant systems. If you insist on the classic look, you'd end up drawing 2 separate squares, one for each system, which is a lot of extra work without much benefit.
Makes sense. Still, I'm curious how all of this translates into a full birth chart for an actual person, not just this sunrise scenario.
Patience, Clara. We'll get there soon. First, we have to define a birth chart as a snapshot of the sky at a specific place and time, horizon to midheaven and everything in between.
That clarifies the basics. I think we're ready to move on.
Excellent. Next, we'll see how to determine the chart sect. Shall we continue?
Let's do it, Arlo.
Sect is crucial in traditional astrology. We classify charts as either diurnal or nocturnal, and trust me, it's more than a minor detail.
All right, Arlo. I've heard of planets being day or night in modern astrology, but an entire chart? Are we overcomplicating something that's pretty straightforward?
Not at all. Determining the chart sect is the first step before analyzing each planet's sect alignment. If the sun is above the horizon, day chart. Below the horizon, night chart. Simple as that.
Conceptually, that's clear. But what if the sun is close to the horizon? Some births happen at dawn or dusk, so we might not have a precise time.
In those borderline cases, we consider civil twilight. Cherry, fill us in?
Civil twilight occurs when the sun is between 0 and 6 degrees below the horizon, enough natural light that outdoor activities don't require artificial lighting.
That's all good in theory, but birth times aren't always accurate. Isn't this adding guesswork to something that should be exact?
You've got a point, Ella. I use predictive techniques, like Ferdaria, to confirm whether a chart's truly day or night. I match life events to the correct timing sequences, so there's less guesswork.
That sounds practical, but also quite involved. Not everyone wants to dig that deep, especially if the data isn't reliable.
True, it can be tricky, but let's keep it simple for now. If the sun's above the horizon, it's a day chart. If it's below, it's night. Now, let's put this into action by casting a real birth chart.
All right, Arlo. Who's the lucky subject for today's lesson?
Clara, you're new to the team. Why don't you choose? Whose chart do you want to explore with traditional astrology?
I've always been fascinated by Charles Dickens. His life seems like the perfect case study for this.
By Jupiter's mighty thunder. Clara, that's an excellent choice. Dickens had such a complex life, it'll be fascinating to see what his chart reveals. Ella, what's your take?
I've read many of Dickens' novels, and his characters are so rich and layered. I'm definitely curious to see how his chart aligns with his life story.
Perfect. Let's dive into Dickens' horoscope and uncover the astrological secrets behind the man. Okay, Cherry, let's pull up Charles Dickens' birth details.
Accessing database. Charles Dickens was born on February 7, 1812, at 7:50 p.m. in Portsmouth, England.
Great. How accurate is that data?
The odd and accuracy rating is A.
A rating? I'm not entirely familiar with how that system works.
By Saturn's stern gaze. Clara, it's crucial. Lois Rawdon created a rating system so astrologers could rely on verified birth information. An A rating means we can trust it, somewhat, though it's not as ironclad as an AA rating.
Interesting. In my modern practice, I've mostly taken birth times at face value, so I guess this rating system gives us a bit more certainty about timing?
Exactly. Cherry, care to summarize the Rawdon ratings for them?
Certainly. AA rating is based on official records. A rating, like Dickens's, relies on data quoted by the individual or a close associate. B indicates biography, and so on. The lower ratings, C, DD, X, XX, are not considered reliable.
Perfect. So, an A rating is good enough for our purpose. Cherry, cast Charles Dickens' birth chart, whole sign houses, no outer planets.
Understood. Generating the traditional birth chart now.
There we go. Ella, can you read off his ascendant and midheaven?
Sure. He's got Virgo rising at 18 degrees 49 minutes, and the midheaven sits in Gemini at 15 degrees 32 minutes.
Virgo ascendant for a writer makes sense. Didn't Dickens focus on meticulous detail in his novels?
Indeed. So, Clara, since you've mastered the basics, what's the chart sect here?
Let's see. The sun's in Aquarius, below the horizon, so that indicates a nocturnal chart.
Excellent. A night chart it is. Cherry, can you list out all the planets and their positions?
Of course. Saturn is in Capricorn at 4 degrees 22 minutes, 5th house. Jupiter in Gemini at 26 degrees 29 minutes, 10th house. Mars in Aries at 7 degrees 32 minutes, 8th house. The Sun in Aquarius at 17 degrees 57 minutes, 6th house. Venus in Pisces at 16 degrees 15 minutes, 7th house. Mercury in Capricorn at 22 degrees 10 minutes, 5th house. And the Moon is in Sagittarius at 12 degrees 36 minutes, 4th house.
Perfect. Anything missing, Ella?
I'd like the nodes and part of fortune, please.
North Node is in Virgo at 9 degrees 11 minutes, South Node in Pisces at 9 degrees 11 minutes, and the part of fortune is in Scorpio at 24 degrees 11 minutes, 3rd house.
Thanks, Cherry. So, Arlo, what's next?
Now that we know Dickens' chart setup and Sect, it's time to talk Ephemeris. We want more information about the movement of the planets.
An ephemeris, Arlo? In the digital era, why bother with a table when a computer can do all this behind the scenes?
Ella, the ephemeris is invaluable. It shows us when a planet stations, turns retrograde, or forms key aspects, crucial for understanding transits around a birth chart.
All right, let's see if it's as useful as you claim. You've got my attention.
Cherry, tell us what William Lilly advises about learning how to use the ephemeris in Christian astrology.
Lilly says, I would have all men well and readily apprehend what precedes, and then they will most easily understand the ephemeris, which is no other thing than a book containing the true places of the planets, in degrees and minutes, in every of the 12 signs both in longitude and latitude, every day of the year at noon.
All right, so an ephemeris is basically a planetary timetable. But in this digital era, do we really need to fuss over old tables when software can just plot a chart for us?
It's not about fussing, Ella. It's about understanding the planetary movements at their core. This knowledge gives you more control and depth than any automated chart can.
Fine. Where can we get these ephemerides then, if we want to do it the old-fashioned way?
There are quite a few websites like astroseek.com and astro.com. Astro.com even has free PDF ephemerides from 5000 BCE to 3999 CE. And for regular transits, I like cafeastrology.com.
All right. So these sites offer daily positions for each planet. Could you show us an actual example, Arlo?
Certainly. Cherry, pull up the March 2020 ephemeris from cafeastrology.com.
Retrieving data now.
See, this lists the day of the month and the planetary positions. The moon's position is listed twice, once at midnight and once at noon, because it moves so quickly.
That makes sense. And how do we interpret each column for, say, March 15th, 2020?
Go for it, Clara. Read the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and Jupiter at midnight.
Sun in Pisces at 25 degrees 1 minute, Moon in Sagittarius at 9 degrees 43 minutes, and Jupiter in Capricorn at 21 degrees 59 minutes.
Spot on. Notice that RX next to Mercury at the start of the month. That indicates retrograde motion. It switches to D when it turns direct on March 10th.
So we can see when the sun changes sign, when a planet goes retrograde, everything. This might be more useful than I thought.
Indeed, the ephemeris lets you track sign changes, retrogrades, and upcoming aspects. It's all about honing your skills as an astrologer, Ella.
Okay, I can see the usefulness, especially if you need to verify transits around someone's birth time, or confirm a station or retrograde.
All right, Arlo. I'll give the ephemeris approach a chance. Just don't expect me to abandon my modern software entirely.
I wouldn't dream of it, Ella. We're here to learn from every tool we can. Now, before we go any further, some folks might not be fully familiar with Charles Dickens' background. Clara, would you mind giving us a brief overview of his life?
Of course, I've gone through several of his biographies, so I can highlight the key events that shaped his work and personal journey.
Excellent. Let's dive in, then. Welcome back to our exploration of Charles Dickens' birth chart. Before we dig deeper into his astrological aspects, we should learn about the man himself. Clara, I believe you've read several of his biographies. Would you mind giving us an overview of Dickens' life story?
Sure, Arlo. I haven't prepared an official presentation, but I can summarize the main points. Dickens was born on February 7, 1812, in Portsmouth, England. His father worked for the Navy Pay Office but struggled with finances, so the family moved around a lot. Eventually, they ended up in London, but money issues got worse. When Charles was about 12, his father landed in debtor's prison, and Charles had to work in a shoe polish factory. That experience really shaped him. He went from a brief, shaky childhood straight into adult responsibilities.
Wait, he worked in a factory at 12? That must have been traumatic. Did he ever go back to school?
Yes, briefly. After his father was released, Dickens returned to school for a bit, but the damage was done. He never forgot how it felt to be forced into labor. He ended up writing about child hardship and social injustice in many of his novels.
By the blazing constellations. That definitely explains the powerful social themes in his stories.
Exactly. He eventually became a law clerk, then a journalist, covering parliamentary debates. That's where he sharpened his observational skills and quick writing style. He published his first literary sketches under the pen name Boz, which gained moderate attention, but his real breakthrough came with the Pickwick Papers around 1836. It started as a simple series of sporting sketches and evolved into an incredibly popular serialized novel.
All in monthly installments, right? So it must have been a cliffhanger experience for readers, waiting for each chapter.
Yes, exactly. Serialization was a big part of Dickens' success. After Pickwick, he wrote Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, and many more. He married Catherine Hogarth in 1836, and they had 10 children, although that marriage hit a rocky end later on.
I recall something about him separating from his wife. Did that affect his writing?
It undoubtedly impacted his personal life. They legally separated in the late 1850s, which was scandalous for the time. Dickens retained custody of most of the children. Around then, he became close to Ellen Ternan, a young actress. Historians still debate the nature of that relationship, but it's clear she traveled with him frequently on his public reading tours.
So he was famous not just for writing, but also for performing his works in public, right?
Correct. Dickens would do dramatic readings of his novels. Audiences adored it, and it brought him additional income. However, it wore him down. He was already writing at a frenetic pace, churning out A Christmas Carol, Bleak House, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations, among others. These tours, combined with his heavy writing schedule, took a toll on his health.
What about his travels to the United States? I heard he had a love-hate relationship with America.
He visited the US in 1842, expecting a perfect reception, and was initially welcomed warmly. But he criticized social issues, especially slavery, and that upset many readers there. Eventually, he returned later for public readings and found more success.
It's fascinating how he juggled social commentary, family life, and a massive literary output. Did that ever slow him down?
Not until his final years. In 1865, he was in a serious train accident at Staplehurst. Although he survived, he never quite recovered from the shock. He passed away in 1870 after suffering a stroke, and, despite his own wish for a modest burial, he was interred in Westminster Abbey's Poets' Corner.
A fitting tribute to such a monumental writer. So, in brief, we have a self-made man who rose from severe childhood hardships to become one of the Victorian era's greatest novelists.
That's right. He used his experiences, imprisonment of a parent, child labor, financial insecurity, to fuel his creativity. His novels often highlight moral and social issues, reflecting that personal motivation.
Thanks, Clara. You really pulled that together quickly. I can see how Dickens' life experiences might reveal interesting astrological signatures in his birth chart.
Indeed, now that we know his story, I'm eager to see how it ties into those planetary placements we identified.
And that's exactly what we'll explore next, how his chart might mirror those key life events. But for now, we'll sign off.
Thank you for joining us today as we dove into the traditional birth chart and Charles Dickens' life story. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be back with more insights into traditional astrology and how it connects to fascinating historical figures. Until next time, bye!